She was supposed to be invisible. Sophia Chun, 23 years old, art history genius turned waitress, had one job at Il Palazzo. Serve the wine, clear the plates, and disappear. But tonight, in the restaurant's most exclusive private suite, Alessandro, New York's most feared mafia boss, is about to sign a $150 million contract to reclaim his family's ancestral Sicilian estates. The document looks perfect. The experts swear it's authentic. The ink is right. The age is right. The seal is right. Except it isn't. And Sophia, standing in the shadows with a water pitcher and a photographic memory for Renaissance iconography, has exactly one chance to do the impossible. Speak 6 words in Sicilian that will stop a catastrophic fraud, expose a deadly conspiracy, and reveal that the invisible waitress in the corner knows more about his heritage than his own historians. November rain in Manhattan was theatrical, the kind that made the city look like it belonged in a film noir. On East 57th Street, where Bentleys idled at red lights and doormen wore white gloves year-round, Illinois Palazzo rose 5 stories of limestone and old-world power. To call it a restaurant was technically accurate, but spiritually insufficient. Il Palazzo was where oligarchs brokered deals, where senators made backroom agreements, where conversations that never appeared in official records happened over $400 bottles of wine. The dress code wasn't posted because if you had to ask, you didn't belong. And moving through this temple of power every evening, carrying trays and wearing a uniform that might as well have been camouflage, was Sophia Chun. At 23, Sophia had become an expert at eraser. Her dark hair was always pulled back so tightly it made her temples throb. Her uniform, white button-down, black vest, black slacks, was always pristine. Her expression was always pleasant but blank. She moved through the dining room like water, filling gaps, anticipating needs, never drawing attention. She was invisible by necessity because if anyone looked too closely, they might recognize her. 3 years ago, Sophia Chun had been the youngest person to ever receive the Wythe Fellowship in Italian Renaissance Studies. Her undergraduate thesis on forgery techniques in 16th-century papal documents had been published in 2 academic journals. She'd been offered research positions at the Met, the Fic, and the Getty. Then her mother got sick, pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Elena Chun didn't believe in 6-month prognosis. She believed in experimental treatments that cost $40,000 a month and weren't covered by insurance. Sophia had made a choice. The fellowships paid $35,000 a year. Il Palazzo's servers made that in 3 months. So she disappeared, ghosted her academic advisors, stopped answering emails from Christie's and Seabees, put her degrees in a drawer, and put on an apron instead. That was 3 years ago. Tonight, you stepped into the light. Because the truth mattered more than safety. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect. What do you want, Sophia Chun? My job back. My mother's treatment is in 2 weeks. Basta. He pulled out his phone. You don't work for Benedetti anymore. You work for me. Authentication, collections, finding lies. He leaned forward. I need someone who sees what others miss. I'm not a criminal. Neither am I. Officially, his smile was sharp. How much does it pay? His lawyer slid over a paper. The number made Sophia choke. Per week, Alessandro clarified. Plus full medical coverage. Any treatment. Any doctor anywhere. What's the price? Loyalty, truth, even when inconvenient. His eyes held hers. Can you do that? Sophia thought of her mother. The bills. 3 years of invisibility. Thought of the rush when truth met power and power listened. Alessandro extended his hand. Benvenuta nella famiglia amurita. Welcome to the family. Outside, rain had stopped. The city glittered and Sophia Chun, invisible for 3 years, was finally terrifyingly, gloriously seen. 3 days after Sophia Chun stopped being invisible, she found herself in a penthouse suite that made Il Palazzo look like a subway station. Alessandro's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a building in Tribeca that officially belonged to a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The windows offered a view of Manhattan that looked like a particularly ambitious CGI rendering. All glittering towers and impossibly clean streets. The furniture was the kind of mid-century modern that cost more than most people's mortgages. Everything was cream and chrome and cold perfection. Except for the conference room, which looked like a bunker had married a museum. The walls were lined with climate-controlled glass cases displaying artifacts that probably shouldn't exist outside of the 8C. A Bellini sketch, what looked suspiciously like a lost Tizhan study. A Xanthine icon that Sophia was fairly certain had been listed as missing since 1943. She didn't ask. That was rule 1 of her new employment. Don't ask where things come from. The table itself was a slab of black walnut that could have doubled as a landing strip surrounded by 12 leather chairs that probably cost more than her Columbia tuition. At the head sat Alessandro, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance portrait titled Portrait of Power Personified. Around him, Martinez, the conciliary, looking like everyone's dangerous uncle. Victoria, the lawyer with her tablet and her expression of permanent calculation. 2 bodyguards whose names Sophia didn't know and suspected she wasn't supposed to ask, and Diego, a translator who spoke 6 languages and had the energy of a particularly nervous rabbit. This was Professor Richard Blackwood, 70-some Oxford credentials, the kind of academic gravitas that came with 3 decades of published papers and a CBE from the Queen. Behind them rolled a security case the size of a small coffin. Pinto, Harrison purred, extending his hand. Alessandro shook it with exactly the amount of pressure required to convey civility without warmth. Thank you for this second chance. I assure you, after our misunderstanding, I've been extraordinarily careful. Show me, Alessandro said. Professor Richard Blackwood cleared his throat with the authority of someone who'd spent his life lecturing to people who were required to listen. Pinto, what I'm about to present represents perhaps the most significant historical document related to your family to surface in a century. Oh, good, Sophia thought. We're starting with hyperbole. That's always a great sign. With theatrical precision, Professor Blackwood unlocked the case. Inside, cushioned on burgundy velvet, lay a manuscript that made Sophia's breath catch despite her cynicism. It was a bound codex, maybe 30 pages. The vellum yellowed to the color of aged cream, the binding cracked leather that had seen centuries. The cover bore an embossed seal, a crowned lion holding a sword surrounded by text in elaborate Gothic script. The Pinto Codex, Professor Blackwood announced, compiled in 1478 by the Sicilian notary Giovanni de Messina, documenting 3 generations of land grants, marriage alliances, and papal dispensations granted to the Pinto family. This is not simply a deed. This is a genealogical and legal record that establishes your family's legitimate claim to the Duche of Altavilla, including the fortress of Castello and approximately 40,000 acres of Sicilian territory. Sophia was refilling water glasses, moving with the practiced invisibility she'd honed over 3 years, but her eyes were locked on the manuscript. It was beautiful. The calligraphy was exquisite, real 15th century work. She could tell from the rhythm of the script, the way certain letters connected. The vellum was genuine, properly aged with the subtle texture that only centuries could create. But something was wrong. The provenance, Harrison interjected smoothly, is impeccable. Recovered from the private library of the Maris of Palermo, whose family served as custodians of Sicilian noble records for 4 centuries, Professor Richard Blackwood has spent 8 months on authentication. Professor Blackwood nodded with the gravity of Moses presenting the tablets. The carbon dating places the vellum between 1465 and 1485. The ink is period-appropriate iron gall compound. The binding technique matches documented 15th century Sicilian bookmaking practices. I have molecular analysis, spectroscopic data, and comparative paleographic studies. Who needs a castle this badly? Sophia wondered, watching Alessandro's face remain perfectly composed, while Harrison quoted a price that had 8 figures. Wait, 40,000 acres in Sicily. That's not a castle. The vellum might be real. The ink might be period accurate, but the language is wrong. It's a forgery using authentic materials. The silence that followed could have shattered diamonds. Harrison found his voice first. This is absurd. Professor Richard Blackwood is one of the world's leading Italian and English manuscript experts, Sophia said, her terror somehow transmuting into something that felt dangerously close to confidence. I read your publications, Professor. They're brilliant. Really. Your work on Tudor-era documents is groundbreaking. But how many Sicilian noble seals have you authenticated? Professor Blackwood's face went from pink to crimson. I've examined dozens of Italian documents from Florence, Venice, Rome, not Sicilian. Sophia turned to Alessandro, who was watching this exchange with the focused intensity of a predator deciding which prey was worth chasing. Sicily isn't Italy. Not in the 15th century. Different linguistic patterns, different cultural influences, different everything. A forger working from Italian templates wouldn't know that. They'd use formal Latin because that's what Italian noble seals used. But Sicilian seals were different. Martinez had picked up the Codex, was examining the seal with new eyes. He pulled out a phone, typed something, waited. His expression darkened. "Capo," he said quietly. "She might be right." Harrison's mask finally slipped completely. "This is ridiculous. You're going to trust a waitress over one of Oxford's finest." Former waitress, Sophia corrected, because apparently her survival instincts had completely abandoned her. Current whatever I am now, professional grammar pedant. Alessandro's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Then he turned to Professor Richard Blackwood with an expression that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. "Professor, did you personally verify the linguistic patterns of the seal inscription against authenticated 15th century Sicilian documents?" Professor Blackwood opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The seal matched the general stylistic patterns of the period. "That's not what I asked." The professor's shoulders sagged. "No, I did not specifically compare it to Sicilian linguistic patterns." Alessandro set down his pen with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Then we have a problem." Harrison made one last desperate play. "Pinto, surely you're not going to allow Fry out." Alessandro's voice was arctic. "Take your Codex, take your expert, and get out of my building before I decide that attempted fraud deserves a more permanent response than embarrassment." Harrison and Professor Blackwood scrambled for the case with the desperate energy of men who'd just been granted an unexpected stay of execution. The bodyguards escorted them to the elevator with the kind of gentle encouragement usually reserved for livestock heading to slaughter. The doors closed. The suite was suddenly devastatingly quiet. Sophia managed, her voice shaking. "I'm not shot, but I'm also being shot at. So, mixed review." He almost smiled. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went dark. He showed her the screen. A text from an unknown number. "The girl saw too much. Next time we won't miss." Sophia stared at the message. Her brilliant academic mind finally catching up to her current reality. Someone didn't want Alessandro to buy the forgeries. Someone wanted to know where he kept his collection. And someone had just tried to kill her to keep her quiet. "So," she said, her voice only shaking a little, "when you said this job came with hazard pay, this is what you meant, isn't it?" Alessandro's laugh was dark. "Welcome to the family business, Amuretta." Outside, sirens began to wail, and Sophia Chen realized that stopping a $200 million fraud was easy. Surviving the people who created it was going to be significantly harder. The thing about being shot at, Sophia discovered, was that it was simultaneously exactly like the movies and nothing like them at all. In movies, bullets made elegant holes in windows, and people dove gracefully behind cover while delivering witty one-liners. In reality, the window didn't just break. It exploded in a shower of glass that sounded like 1,000 chandeliers shattering at once. The bullet didn't whistle. It made a sound like fabric ripping, followed by the meaty thunk of lead hitting plaster. And there was nothing graceful about the way Alessandro slammed her into the floor behind his desk, his body covering hers while her lungs forgot how to process oxygen. Stay down." Martinez's voice cut through the chaos as another window disintegrated. He was already moving, pulling a gun from somewhere. When did he get a gun? And barking orders into his phone in rapid-fire Italian. The bodyguards materialized like dangerous ghosts, weapons drawn, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that came from military training and probable war crimes. One was on the phone. Edificio Incostrian Lot Fume Torelto building under construction Riverside Sniper. The other was at the window staying low, eyes scanning the waterfront with professional intensity. And Sophia was on the floor under a mafia boss, her cheek pressed against Italian marble that probably cost more per square foot than most people's cars. Her brain simultaneously screaming, "You're going to die? And this floor is surprisingly comfortable. How many shots?" Alessandro's voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. Like being shot at was a minor scheduling inconvenience. 3 confirmed. One of the bodyguards replied. Calibro peasant. Professional. Heavy caliber. Can you return fire? Tropo distant. Sinuentometry. Too far. Maybe more. Another shot. Punched through what remained of the windows close enough that Sophia felt the displaced air kiss her hair. She made a sound that was probably supposed to be a scream, but came out as more of a wheeze. Breathe, Alessandro said quietly, his mouth near her ear. Slow breaths in through your nose. You're okay. I'm being shot at, Sophia gasped. That's the literal opposite of okay. That's the dictionary definition of not okay. If you look up not okay in the thesaurus, there's probably a picture of this exact moment. You're babbling. It's a coping mechanism. Some people pray. I provide running commentary. Despite everything, the bullets, the chaos, the very real possibility of death by sniper. She heard him laugh. Quiet, brief, but genuine. Capo Martinez called. We need to move. Building's not secure. If there's one shooter, there could be more. Ground floor now. The elevators are death traps, service stairs, a dezo now. Alessandro pulled Sophia to her feet, keeping low, his hand gripping her arm with enough force to bruise. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. Understand. Is please don't let me die an acceptable response. Ando, let's go. They moved in a tight formation, bodyguards front and back, Martinez at point, Alessandro keeping Sophia in the center like she was a particularly valuable package. They hit the service stairs at a run, their footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. 3 floors down, Martinez's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. Merida, they've got the lobby covered. 2 men, possibly 3. Professional setup. The kitchen exit. Alessandro asked. Loading dock connects to the restaurant next door. Vietnamese place. Kitchen should be active. Lots of civilians, which means they can't. A door above them crashed open. Footsteps heavy and fast coming down. Corey, run. They exploded through the door marked B2 kitchen access into a humid corridor that smelled like lemongrass and fish sauce. The sounds of a busy restaurant kitchen hit them. Clanging pots, shouted orders in Vietnamese, the hiss of woks over high flame. They burst through swinging doors into chaos. A kitchen in full dinner rush. 10 cooks in white coats moving in synchronized chaos. Flames leaping from woks. Steam rising from industrial pots. Everyone froze at the sight of armed men in expensive suits crashing through their prep area. Martinez shouted in his best authoritative American accent, flashing something that might have been a badge or might have been a very convincing fake. Active threat. Clear the exits. To their credit, the kitchen staff reacted with the jaded efficiency of New York restaurant workers who'd probably seen weirder things during dinner service. They scattered toward the dining room, taking their knives with them. There, Alessandro pointed to a heavy metal door, the kind that led to service alleys, to dumpsters, to the behind-the-scenes Manhattan that tourists never saw. They hit the door at full speed, emerging into a rain-slick alley that looked like it had been designed specifically for dramatic chase scenes. The November rain had picked up again, turning the pavement into a mirror that reflected neon signs from the street beyond. A black Mercedes was already there, engine running. The driver, another bodyguard, Sophia vaguely recognized, had the back door open before they'd fully exited the building. Dentro, inside. Martinez shoved Sophia toward the car. She dove into the back seat, Alessandro right behind her. Martinez and 1 bodyguard piled into the front. The other bodyguard stayed behind, weapon drawn, covering their exit. The car accelerated before the doors were fully closed, tires screaming on wet pavement. Sophia was thrown against Alessandro as they took the corner at a speed that was definitely illegal and possibly suicidal. Status, Alessandro demanded, his arm instinctively going around Sophia to keep her from being thrown around the back seat like a rag doll. 2 shooters confirmed at the lobby, Martinez reported. Phone pressed to his ear. Professional team. They scattered when NYPD responded to the shots fired call. Our people are tracking them. But Aspetosa, he listened, his expression going from concern to furious. Quando what? Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet. Harrison and Professor Blackwood, we found them. Martinez's jaw clenched. Both dead execution style about an hour ago, dumped in a parking garage in Queens. The temperature in the car dropped. So they were never the masterminds, Alessandro said slowly. They were delivery men, and whoever hired them cleaned up loose ends the moment the deal fell through. Which means someone knew within minutes that Sophia stopped the deal. Martinez added grimly. Someone was watching. Someone close. Sophia's brain, running on pure adrenaline and possibly shock, finally caught up to the implications. Wait, they tried to kill me because I spotted the forgery. Which means they really wanted you to accept that document, not for the money. If it was just a scam, they'd have disappeared with the deposit. But they stuck around. They sent a sniper. She looked at Alessandro. What was on that document that was worth killing for? His expression was grim. That's the question, isn't it? The car swerved again, taking a service road that ran along the waterfront through the rain-streaked windows. Sophia could see the Manhattan skyline, beautiful, glittering, completely indifferent to the fact that she'd been shot at approximately 7 minutes ago. On a scale of occupational hazard to actively planning my funeral, how worried should I be? Alessandro looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. You just survived a professional assassination attempt. Most people would be crying or catatonic. Most people didn't grow up with a mother who thought appropriate dinner conversation was, let's discuss the technical methods medieval poisoners used to avoid detection. Sophia took a shaky breath. Also, I'm absolutely going to have a breakdown later. Right now, I'm running on adrenaline and possibly shock. Ask me again in an hour when my brain remembers how to feel things. Despite everything, he smiled. You're remarkable. I'm a disaster held together by student debt and spite. That too. The car pulled into an underground parking garage, not a public one, but the kind that required biometric access and had cameras on every surface. They descended 3 levels into concrete and fluorescent lighting. Safe house, Martinez explained, already typing on his phone. No one knows about this location except core family. We'll regroup, figure out who's trying to kill us, and plan accordingly. The car stopped. Everyone piled out with the efficient speed of people who'd done this before. Sophia stumbled slightly as her legs remembered they were made of jelly, and Alessandro caught her arm. Easy, he said quietly. I'm fine, Sophia lied. Then, because apparently near-death experiences destroyed her filter completely. So, first date's going great, really exceeded expectations. 5 stars would recommend to friends. Alessandro stared at her for a beat. Then he laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing in the concrete garage. First date. Well, you bought me wine. We had dinner conversation. Someone tried to kill us. That's basically a first date in New York, right? Dio Martinez muttered. Capo, she's insane. She's in shock, Alessandro corrected, but his eyes were warm. And she's right. This is going great. He kept his hand on her arm as they walked toward an unmarked steel door. His touch was steady, grounding, the only thing keeping Sophia from floating away on a cloud of terror and inappropriate humor. Sophia, he said quietly, so only she could hear. I need you to understand something. That I'm probably going to die. That you're the only person who saw what was wrong with those documents, which makes you the only witness I can trust. His expression was serious now, the humor gone. Everyone else in my organization, my experts, my advisors, even my family could be compromised. But you have no reason to lie to me. No agenda except survival and truth. That's a terrible basis for trust. It's the only basis for trust. His grip tightened slightly. Which means until we find who's behind this, you don't leave my sight. Sophia should have been terrified. Should have demanded to be taken home. To be released from this insane job. To be allowed to return to her safe, invisible life. Instead, she looked up at this dangerous, complicated man who just shielded her body with his own and said, understood. The steel door opened onto a stairwell leading down deeper into the earth, deeper into his world. And Sophia Chun, scholar and former waitress, followed Alessandro into the dark because the truth was worth protecting, even if it killed her. The safe house was not a house. It was a fortress disguised as luxury. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Battery Park City, the kind of address that didn't appear on GPS and required 3 separate security clearances just to access the elevator. The apartment itself looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many spy movies and had unlimited budget to make their fantasies reality. Bulletproof windows, reinforced steel doors, a panic room hidden behind what looked like a wine cellar, and furniture that managed to be both comfortable and strategic. Everything positioned with clear sight lines to entrances, nothing blocking escape routes. Let me guess, Sophia said, taking in the space with the exhausted detachment of someone whose brain had hit its maximum capacity for terror approximately an hour ago. Because I paid $3 million for that document 5 years ago, and 3 experts told me it was authentic. Sophia looked back at the parchment, her pulse quickening. This was a test. Everything was a test with him. She examined the seal more carefully, looked at the ink patterns, studied the way the text flowed. Then she noticed something. A tiny inconsistency in the spacing. A subtle difference in ink density in one section. The document is authentic, she said slowly. But it's been altered. Someone added text here. She pointed to a section near the bottom, probably in the 18th or 19th century. The added text claims mineral rights to the property. The original document wouldn't have mentioned minerals because they weren't legally relevant until mining laws changed in the 1700s. You paid $3 million for a real document that someone enhanced to be worth more. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but she felt the shift in the room's energy, like a predator recognizing worthy prey. How can you tell? The ink in that section has a slightly different composition. You can see it under magnification. It's trying to match the original, but the chemical signature is off by maybe 50 years. Also, the handwriting is trying too hard. Forgers always try too hard to match the original hand. Real scribes make unconscious variations. This is too perfect. She sat back. So, congratulations. You own an authentic 15th century land deed with fraudulent 18th century additions. It's worth maybe $500,000, not $3 million. I knew you were good, Alessandro said softly. I didn't know you were this good. Is this the part where you ask for a refund? This is the part where I realize everyone who's ever sold me historical documents is about to have a very bad week. He smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. Starting tomorrow, you're reviewing every acquisition I've made in the last decade. That sounds like months of work. Do I get hazard pay? You get to keep breathing, which is more generous than I usually am with people who cost me too. $5 million. Technically, the person who sold you the altered document cost you that money. I just pointed it out. Don't split hairs, Sophia. It's literally my job to split hairs. Also, grammatical errors, also forgeries. I'm very good at splitting things. For the first time, he actually laughed. A genuine sound that transformed his entire face from dangerous to almost human. You're either the bravest woman in New York or the most self-destructive. I'm academically thorough with suicidal honesty. It's a specific personality type. The moment hung between them, sharp and electric, the kind of tension that could tip either into violence or something equally dangerous. His eyes held hers, and Sophia felt her breath catch. This was more than respect. This was recognition. Two people who understood that truth had a cost, and paid it anyway. The door burst open. She thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about truth and integrity. But they'd been shot at together, had bled together, had run through rain-soaked alleys while people tried to kill them. They were past noble lies. Because I spent 3 years being invisible, she said. 3 years pretending I wasn't the smartest person in every room. 3 years failing at the only thing I was ever good at, seeing the truth. And I was so scared that if I stayed silent one more time, I'd disappear completely. I'd become the ghost I was pretending to be. She swallowed hard. I didn't speak up because it was brave. I spoke up because staying silent was a kind of death. His hand came up, cupped her face with surprising gentleness. You're terrified constantly, but you do it anyway. What choice do I have? The Sicilian endearment that meant little love, little light. You have every choice. You could run, disappear, go back to being invisible. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But you won't. How do you know? Because you're like me. His voice was rough now, intimate. You'd rather die visible than live as a ghost. The moment stretched between them. Electric, dangerous, inevitable. His hand was still on her face. Her heart was hammering. The space between them had become measurably smaller, though neither remembered moving. This is a terrible idea, Sophia whispered. Probably the worst I've had all week. We're in a safe house because people are trying to kill us. Makes it worse or better. Depending on perspective, I work for you. This violates approximately 12 HR policies. I don't have HR. That's not the defense you think it is. He smiled slow, devastating, the expression of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and was doing it anyway. Tell me to stop. She should. She absolutely should. This was insane, unprofessional, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with snipers and everything to do with the way her entire body had decided that oxygen was optional. The explosion shook the building like a giant had kicked it. The windows rattled. The lights flickered. Somewhere below them, car alarms started screaming in harmony with the sudden wail of fire alarms. Alessandro's entire demeanor changed in a heartbeat from intimate to tactical, from almost lover to protector. He pulled Sofia behind him, his body once again serving as her shield. Martinez burst through the door, gun drawn. Capo, parking garage, vehicle bomb, 3 floors down. Casualties. Our people are checking, but Martinez's expression was grim. Capo, they found us. They found the safe house. Sofia's blood turned to ice. Because safe houses were supposed to be secret, known only to core family, which meant inside job confirmed, Alessandro said, his voice deadly quiet. Someone told them where we were. His jaw clenched. How many people knew this location? 7, Martinez said. You, me, the bodyguards. He paused. And Victoria. I called her when we changed locations. Standard protocol. The silence was absolute. A different one this time. Something nondescript and fast. Martinez drove like he was auditioning for Formula One. Sofia kept pressure on Alessandro's wound, her hands red with his blood, her mind eerily calm. Where are we going? She asked. Red Hook Marine Terminal, Martinez said grimly. Old warehouse, one of the original family holdings. He glanced at Alessandro in the rearview mirror. Capo, you good? Been better. Been worse. Alessandro's voice was strained but steady. He looked at Sofia. You threw Molotov cocktails. I was inspired. You saved Diego's life. I was helping. You're not what I expected. Is that a compliment, or are you hallucinating from blood loss? His smile was tired but real. The warehouse was exactly what it sounded like. Massive industrial smelling of oil and old fish. Martinez had called ahead. More of Alessandro's people were waiting. 6 men with guns and expressions that suggested they were done being polite about things. They carried Alessandro inside, laid him on a table that had probably seen worse things than emergency field medicine. Someone had brought a proper first aid kit, the military kind, with sutures and antibiotics and painkillers that were definitely not over the counter. Sofia cleaned the wound properly, stitched it with hands that barely shook. Her years of watching her mother's medical procedures finally paying dividends she'd never wanted to use. You're good at this, Alessandro said quietly, watching her work. I'm motivated not to let you die. She tied off the last suture. Also, you still owe me 3 months' salary and excellent health insurance. Can't collect if you're dead. Always thinking practically. Someone has to. Martinez entered, phone in hand, his expression murderous. Capo, we found Victoria and she's at her apartment acting like nothing's wrong. But he pulled up something on his phone, showed Alessandro. We tracked the forgeries, the commission, the payments, everything. They all lead back to the same source. Sofia leaned over to look. Bank transfers, encrypted messages, a trail of digital breadcrumbs that someone hadn't been careful enough to hide. And there, at the center of it all, was a name that made Alessandro's face go cold. Vincent Romano, he said quietly. The word was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal and fury and something that might have been grief. Your cousin? Martinez asked, though it wasn't really a question. My cousin. Alessandro's jaw clenched. He commissioned the forgeries, used Victoria to authenticate them, tried to place tracking devices in my collection, then tried to kill me when it failed. He looked up at Martinez, and his eyes were empty of everything except cold purpose. How long? Best we can tell, 2 years, maybe more. He's been positioning himself to take over, talking to the other families, making alliances, building support. Martinez's voice was grim. Capo, he's been planning a coup. The silence in the warehouse was absolute. Where is he? Alessandro asked quietly. Victoria gave him up. And Sofia Chun, scholar and accidental warrior, realized that some truths were worth more than survival. Some truths were worth everything. The Romano estate in Staten Island looked like something out of a Gothic novel. All wrought iron gates and overgrown gardens. The kind of place where family secrets went to fester and occasionally murder people. The mansion itself was dark except for lights blazing in the East Wing library. An invitation, a challenge, a stage set for the final act. He wants an audience, Martinez muttered, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. Thinks he's already won. Maybe he has, Alessandro said quietly, his wounded shoulder bound tight beneath a fresh shirt. He'd refused painkillers, need to stay sharp, and the blood loss was making his face pale in the dashboard lights. Maybe this was always going to end here. Don't, Sophia said sharply from the back seat. Don't you dare get philosophical on me. We're walking into what is very obviously a trap, and I need you focused, not composing your tragic final monologue. Yes, doctor. They brought 6 men, all family, all loyal to Alessandro's father, all armed and looking like they'd welcome an excuse for violence. But Alessandro had been clear. This is between Vincent and me. Your backup, not the main event. Sophia had her phone in her pocket, recording app already running. Whatever happened in that library, there would be evidence. Truth preserved even if they didn't survive to use it. Medieval scholars didn't run toward danger, she thought as they approached the mansion. They stayed in monasteries and complained about the quality of vellum. Why didn't I become a normal academic? Because normal academics didn't save mafia bosses from forgeries, and they definitely didn't fall for dangerous men with shoulder wounds and trust issues. Fall for, her brain whispered. We're calling it that now. Shut up, she told herself. Existential crisis later. Survival now. The front door was unlocked. Another message. Come in. I'm waiting. They moved through the house like ghosts, through a foyer with dusty chandeliers, past family portraits whose eyes seemed to follow their movement, up a grand staircase that creaked with age and secrets. The library door stood open. Light spilled out, warm and inviting and absolutely treacherous. Alessandro paused at the threshold, looked at Martinez. 2 minutes. If shooting starts before then, it means diplomacy failed. Capo, 2 minutes, Alessandro repeated. Then to Sophia, stay behind me. Obviously, I'm small and squishy. You're large and recently bullet-resistant. He almost laughed. Then he walked into the library, and Sophia followed, her phone recording everything in her pocket. Vincent Romano sat in a leather chair like it was a throne. He was younger than Alessandro, maybe 28, with the same dark hair and sharp features, but softer somehow, like a sculpture that hadn't been fully finished, handsome in a way that probably got him whatever he wanted until he encountered something that couldn't be charmed. He was also holding a gun casually, like it was a glass of wine. Quino, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cousin, you look terrible. Someone shoot you. Someone tried. Alessandro moved further into the room, putting himself between Vincent and Sophia. Always protecting, always the shield. Your people, I assume. My people. Vincent's smile widened. I like the sound of that. Like I'm building something, which I am actually. I'm building what should have been mine from the beginning. Papa left me the business. Papa left you everything. The charm cracked, revealing rage beneath. The business, the estate, the respect, the legacy, and what did I get? A monthly allowance and a seat at the children's table during family meetings. He stood, the gun now pointed more deliberately. I'm older than you were when you took over. Smarter, better educated, but you were his favorite, his heir, his perfect soldier son. So you tried to destroy me. Alessandro's voice was calm, but Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his right hand hovered near his concealed weapon. The forgeries, the tracking devices, the assassination attempts. All because you're jealous. I'm realistic, Vincent corrected. You're weak, Alessandro. You hire outsiders. His eyes flicked to Sophia with contempt. You trust people who aren't blood. You try to legitimize what Papa built instead of expanding it. You're making us soft. I'm keeping us alive, Alessandro said quietly. Papa's methods worked in his time. This is different. This is surrender. Vincent's voice rose. You've forgotten what we are, what this family was built on. Blood and fear and power. He gestured with the gun. I'm going to remind them, starting with you. Sophia's heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. The phone in her pocket was recording every word, every confession, every self-incriminating rant about assassination and betrayal. Just keep him talking, she thought. Give Martinez time to position people. Give the recording time to upload to cloud storage. You commissioned the forgeries, Alessandro said. It wasn't a question. Used Victoria to authenticate them. Planted tracking devices to map my collection. Victoria was easy, Vincent said with a shrug. Debt makes people flexible, and she's been in love with you for years, which made betraying you even sweeter for her. Got it, Sophia thought. Confession to conspiracy, attempted murder, and being a general sociopath. That should hold up in court if we survive to see a court. And when I didn't accept the documents, Alessandro pressed, Plan B. Kill you. Make it look like a rival family. Step in as the grieving cousin who stabilizes everything. Vincent's smile was poisonous. It would have worked perfectly if your little waitress hadn't stuck her nose where it didn't belong. Alessandro's voice carried a warning. Don't insult your pet academic. The girl who saved you with her useless degree. Vincent's laugh was ugly. She's a weakness, Alessandro. The fact that you brought her here proves it. The old you would have locked her somewhere safe. The new you, keep her close because you're soft. I keep her close because she's the only person who's been honest with me, Alessandro said quietly. Which is more than I can say for family. The words hit like a physical blow. Vincent's expression twisted into something ugly. Hate and hurt and rage all mixed together. Then let's make this simple, he said, raising the gun. I kill you. I kill her. I tell everyone the rivals got to you before we could intervene. Tragic, heroic even. And I take what should have always been mine. Everything happened at once. Vincent fired. Alessandro moved, trying to shield Sophia, but she was already diving sideways. Her years of being small and fast in crowded restaurants finally paying lethal dividends. The bullet missed them both, buried itself in the bookshelf. Priceless first editions exploded into confetti. Martinez and the guards burst through the door, weapons drawn. Vincent's people, because of course he had people hidden, emerged from behind furniture, from doorways, from shadows. The library became a war zone. Sophia hit the floor behind a desk, her ears ringing from gunfire, her brain running on pure survival instinct. She could see Alessandro across the room, taking cover behind an overturned table, returning fire with cold precision despite his wounded shoulder. Martinez was shouting orders. Someone was screaming, wounded, maybe dying. The smell of gunpowder filled the air like a toxic perfume. And then Vincent was there, looming over Sophia, his gun pointed at her face, his expression triumphant. You should have stayed invisible, he said. Sophia's mouth opened, her brain running on terror and adrenaline and possibly divine intervention switched languages. To see Niardu, she said in perfect Sicilian. You're a coward. Niardu Canon Sapamo. A coward who doesn't even know how to betray properly. Vincent froze, shock replacing rage. What an means. Sophia continued, standing slowly, her hands raised but her voice steady. My grandfather taught me Sicilian, and he told me traitors are always the first to die, because family always remembers. She was stalling, buying time, using every scrap of linguistic knowledge her mother had drilled into her, and it was working. Vincent was listening, confused by this waitress speaking his grandmother's dialect, this outsider who somehow knew the old words. Alessandro, Sophia said quietly. Alessandro isn't weak. He's strong enough to trust those who aren't blood. Tuni, you're not. Vincent raised the gun. Alessandro appeared behind him like a vengeful ghost. Vincent. His cousin turned. The gun swung toward Alessandro. They were 5 feet apart, close enough to see each other's faces, to recognize the family resemblance, to understand that this was the end of something that had started generations ago. Don't, Alessandro said quietly. Quino, don't make me. Time did that crystalline thing where every second became ours. Sophia saw the muzzle flash, saw Alessandro's body twist, saw him fall, saw blood, too much blood, always too much blood, spread across his chest. She screamed, didn't remember starting, but sound was ripping from her throat as she launched herself at Vincent with the fury of someone who'd spent 3 years being invisible and was done. Being silent, she tackled him, all 115 pounds of rage and terror and love she hadn't admitted to yet, and they went down hard. The gun skittered away. Martinez was there instantly, pulling her off, restraining Vincent with efficient brutality. But Sophia didn't care about Vincent anymore. She crawled to Alessandro, her hands immediately finding the wound. High chest, bleeding badly, his breathing shallow and wrong. No, 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 she heard herself saying, pressure on the wound. Her hands red again. Everything red again. You don't get to die? You promised me dinner. Expensive dinner. You can't die before you pay your debts. That's just bad business. 7 more had been authentic but altered, their provenance enhanced by careful fraud. The total loss, $73 million. The total prevented from future fraud, incalculable. Vincent was in federal custody, charged with everything from conspiracy to attempted murder. Victoria, the traitorous lawyer, had turned state's witness in exchange for a reduced sentence. The forgery ring had connections to 3 countries and included 2 respected academics who'd sold their credentials for cash. It was, as one FBI agent had told Sophia, the biggest art fraud case we've seen in 20 years. And it had started because a waitress had spotted a backward seal. Now that waitress stood on a balcony 42 floors above Manhattan, watching November rain start to fall over the city like a curtain closing on one act and opening on another. Behind her, she heard the balcony door open. Footsteps, the familiar presence that still made her heart do complicated things. "You're thinking too loud," Alessandro said, coming to stand beside her. He'd healed well. The shoulder wound was now just a scar, a reminder he'd survived. The chest wound had been worse, requiring surgery and weeks of recovery that he'd endured with the patience of a caged tiger. "I can hear it from inside. I'm not thinking. I'm brooding. What's the difference? Thinking is productive. Brooding is aesthetic." She glanced at him. He was wearing a simple black sweater and jeans, casual in a way that somehow made him more dangerous, not less. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot twice and lived to complain about it." He smiled. "Thanks to you. Thanks to modern medicine and your apparently superhuman constitution. I just kept you conscious with threats and sarcasm. Your bedside manner needs work. I'm not a nurse. I'm a cultural consultant." She said the title with exaggerated importance. "Very different skill set. Is that what we're calling it? What else would we call it?" He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the expensive one that still made her slightly dizzy. "We could call it what it is. You work for me because you're brilliant. You stay because you want to. Presumptuous. Accurate." His hand came up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You could have left 6 weeks ago. Could have taken any position. The Met called. Christie's called. 3 different universities called. But you're still here. The pay is excellent. The company isn't terrible either. The company got me shot at. The company took a bullet for you." His expression was serious now, the humor fading into something deeper. "I meant what I said in the library before I passed out dramatically." Sophia's heart was doing acrobatics. "You were bleeding out. People say things." "I meant it," he repeated firmly. "Every word. You're not invisible, Sophia. You never were. From the moment you spoke up in that suite, from the moment you said this is fake, when everyone else was lying." He took her hand, laced their fingers together. "I knew you were extraordinary. Joy, hope, a future that didn't involve looking over his shoulder constantly." From inside, she heard the soft clink of glasses. Martinez had left champagne because apparently even deadly serious conciliary approved of romance when it involved people who'd bled together. Alessandro retrieved the glasses, returned to the balcony where Sophia waited in the rain. He handed her one, kept the other, and raised it in a toast. To the waitress who said, "This is fake," he said solemnly. Sophia raised her glass, her smile bright enough to rival the city lights. To the mafia boss who listened, they drank. The champagne was exceptional, probably cost more than her old monthly rent. Everything in Alessandro's world was excessive, expensive, edged with danger. She wouldn't have it any other way. He set down his glass, took hers, set it aside. Then he pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it tasted like rain and champagne and promises kept. It tasted like truth, messy and complicated, and absolutely worth it. The city sparkled below them. 8 million people living their lives, none of them knowing that on a balcony in Tribeca, a scholar and a reformed criminal were writing their own ending, or maybe their beginning. Because the truth was, Sophia Chun had stopped being invisible the moment she chose to speak. And Alessandro had stopped being alone the moment he chose to listen. Everything else, the money, the danger, the headlines, was just details. What mattered was this: a woman brave enough to tell the truth, and a man wise enough to value it more than anything money could buy. As the rain fell, and the city lights shimmered, and the champagne went flat because they were too busy kissing to drink it, Sophia thought about her mother's words from years ago. "Truth doesn't negotiate, Sophia. It simply is." She'd been right, and the truth was simple. Love, like authentic art, couldn't be forged. It could only be recognized, protected, and cherished. Everything else was just expensive fakery. 3 months later, the Times ran a smaller article on page B7. Alessandro, Italian-American businessman and art collector, announced today the establishment of the Elena Chin Foundation for Renaissance Studies, a fully funded scholarship program for students pursuing authentication and preservation of historical documents. The foundation will be directed by Dr. Sophia Chun, whose expertise recently exposed one of the largest art fraud rings in recent history. When asked for comment, Mr. Alessandro stated simply, "Truth is worth protecting. This is how we protect it." The article included a photo. Alessandro and Sophia at the foundation's opening, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, both of them smiling at something off camera. They looked, a casual observer might note, like people who'd survived something terrible together and come out the other side stronger. They looked, a more astute observer might recognize, like people in love. They looked, Sophia's mother would later say while framing the article, like they belonged together. And for once, everyone was telling the truth. Sophia started invisible and ended up seen. Alessandro started alone and ended up loved. And you just experienced a story about truth, courage, and the kind of love that's worth fighting for. If you want more stories that make you feel something, stories that remind you why romance and danger and wit make the perfect combination, then subscribe. We're building a community of people who believe in powerful storytelling. Join us. Click subscribe, explore our other videos, and let's keep telling stories that matter. See you in the comments. Tell me your favorite moment from this. 6 months after the foundation's opening, Sophia Chin stood in the climate-controlled vault beneath Alessandro's Tribeca building, examining what appeared to be a 12th century Byzantine manuscript. The parchment was exquisite, the gold leaf illumination breathtaking, and absolutely, completely fake. She sighed, making notes on her tablet. That's the third forgery this week. She called to Alessandro, who was reviewing security footage at the monitoring station. Your reputation for discerning authentic pieces is apparently attracting every con artist on the eastern seaboard. Alessandro looked up from the screens, his expression amused. At least they're high-quality fakes now. Remember that terrible Caravaggio someone tried to sell me last month? The one painted on canvas from Home Depot. Sophia laughed despite herself. That was tragic. Though I have to admit, the audacity was impressive. Someone actually thought they could pass off a painting done with acrylic paint as 17th century oil work. Either tremendous confidence or complete ignorance of art history. Probably both, Alessandro said, walking over to examine the manuscript she was holding. What gave this one away? The binding technique is wrong for the period. Byzantine manuscripts from this era used a specific type of thread made from silk that had a particular twist pattern. This thread is cotton, machine-made, probably from the 1800s at the earliest. Also, the gold leaf application is too uniform. Medieval illuminators had slight variations in thickness that created subtle color differences. This is too perfect, too consistent. Someone used modern techniques, trying to recreate medieval work. Alessandro nodded, making a note to have Martinez investigate the seller. Your eye for detail continues to impress me. I've been thinking about expanding your role. Oh, Sophia set down the manuscript carefully. What did you have in mind? I want you to lead authentication for all major acquisitions, not just the suspicious ones. Full authority to reject anything that doesn't meet your standards, regardless of price or provenance. It's a significant responsibility. Are you ready for that level of decision-making? Sophia considered this. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified at the prospect of making decisions worth millions of dollars. Now, after surviving assassination attempts and exposing international forgery rings, authenticating art seemed almost peaceful by comparison. I think I can handle it, she said. Though I should warn you, my standards are very high. I'm not interested in acquiring pieces just because they're expensive or prestigious. I want art that tells stories, that represents genuine human achievement. That's exactly what I want too. Alessandro's expression grew serious. Sophia, there's something else we need to discuss. The Romano investigation has uncovered something significant. Vincent wasn't working alone. The forgery network extends far beyond what we initially discovered. Sophia felt a familiar chill of unease. How far? Martinez has traced connections to auction houses in London, galleries in Paris, private collectors across 3 continents. We're looking at an organization that's been systematically creating and placing high-end forgeries for at least a decade. The estimated value of fraudulent pieces they've successfully sold exceeds $500 million. And they know I'm the one who exposed them, Sophia said quietly. Which makes you a target, Alessandro confirmed. But it also makes you invaluable. Your expertise is the key to identifying their work, to protecting legitimate collectors from being defrauded. I need you to help me build something bigger than just my personal collection. What do you mean? I want to create an authentication network, a consortium of the world's most discerning collectors and experts. A group dedicated to preserving genuine art and exposing fraud wherever we find it. Think of it as a combination research institute and investigation unit, with you at the center. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. This would mean leaving behind any chance of a quiet academic life, committing fully to a world that existed at the intersection of art, money, and danger. Are you asking me to become a professional fraud hunter? I'm asking you to become something more important. A guardian of truth in a field built on lies and speculation. Alessandro moved closer, his voice becoming more intimate. I'm also asking if you're prepared to make this life permanent. We work well together, Sophia. Not just professionally. The warehouse in Red Hook had been converted into something resembling a Renaissance workshop crossed with a modern laboratory. Sophia supervised the installation of specialized equipment for analyzing paint composition, carbon dating parchment, and examining brush stroke patterns under microscopic detail. The space would serve as headquarters for their authentication network, which had already attracted interest from major museums and private collectors worldwide. Martinez handled security, ensuring the facility could protect both valuable artifacts and the people examining them. The team had grown to include specialists in medieval manuscripts, classical antiquities, modern paintings, and forensic analysis. Each expert had been carefully vetted, their loyalty secured through generous compensation and the knowledge that they were participating in something genuinely important. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in Spanish colonial art, was examining a supposedly 16th century gold altarpiece when she called Sophia over. This is interesting, Dr. Vasquez said, pointing to a section of detailed metalwork. The craftsmanship is exceptional, definitely period appropriate. But look at this inscription. Sophia leaned in with a magnifying glass. The text was in Latin, praising God and commemorating the patronage of a wealthy merchant family. It all looked correct until she noticed a subtle irregularity in one word. Wait, she said. This word, benefactor, the spelling is slightly off. It should be benefactorum in this grammatical context, not benefactor. That's a mistake someone would make if they were working from a dictionary rather than understanding the language naturally. Dr. Vasquez nodded. Plus, the gold composition is wrong. I ran spectroscopic analysis, and while the piece contains the right metals for the period, the ratios are slightly off. 16th century Spanish gold had trace elements from specific mines that created a unique signature. This gold contains modern refinement markers. So we have a genuine antique piece that's been altered with modern materials and inscriptions to increase its value, Sophia concluded. The base altar piece might be authentic 16th century work, but someone enhanced it in the 20th century to make it appear more historically significant. Exactly. It's worth maybe $50,000 as an authentic piece with modern alterations, not the $2 million the seller was asking. Sophia smiled grimly. Another fraud prevented. She made notes for the report they'd send to the potential buyer, a collector in Texas who'd been considering the piece for his museum. Their reputation for thoroughness was spreading quickly through the art world, along with their reputation for being absolutely uncompromising about authenticity. Alessandro found her later that evening, reviewing documentation for 3 separate investigations their team was pursuing. You're working late, he observed, settling into the chair across from her desk. Big day tomorrow. The Italian Ministry of Culture is sending representatives to discuss our findings about those Renaissance drawings that surfaced in Florence last month. If our analysis is correct, they're looking at the largest art fraud case in Italian history. How confident are you in the team's conclusions? Completely confident. The paper analysis, ink composition, and artistic technique all point to modern creation using period materials. Someone has been very systematically creating fake masterpieces and placing them through legitimate auction houses. The level of sophistication is extraordinary, but the mistakes are consistent once you know what to look for. Alessandro nodded. The ministry is considering asking us to examine their entire collection of recently acquired Renaissance pieces. It could be months of work. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? Sophia looked up from her papers, studying his face. This isn't just about work, is it? You're asking if I'm prepared to build a life here, with you, in this strange world we've created. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. 6 months ago, you were invisible, serving wine to people who didn't notice you existed. Now you're leading an international effort to preserve artistic integrity. You could walk away tomorrow, take a position at any major museum, return to traditional academic work. But you stay. Why? Because this matters, Sophia said simply. Because we're not just cataloging art, we're protecting truth. And because working with you, building something meaningful together, feels more important than anything I could accomplish alone. Also, because leaving now would mean abandoning the most interesting challenge I've ever encountered. Alessandro smiled. Which is why I want to make this official. He reached into his jacket, producing a small velvet box. Sophia's breath caught. This is either a very generous bonus, or we're about to have a conversation that changes everything. Both, Alessandro said, opening the box to reveal a ring that was simultaneously elegant and unusual. The center stone was a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, but the band itself was engraved with text in medieval Latin. Sophia recognized the phrase immediately. Veritas vincit omnia. Truth conquers all. It seemed appropriate, Alessandro said softly. Given how we met, how we work together, what we've built. Truth has been the foundation of everything between us. Sophia stared at the ring, her mind racing through the implications. Marriage to Alessandro would mean full commitment to this life, to the danger and complexity that came with his world, to the responsibility of their work together. It would also mean acknowledging what had been growing between them for months, the partnership that had evolved into something much deeper. You realize that accepting this means I'm committing to a life that's the opposite of invisible, she said. I'll be Sophia Alessandro, wife of a man whose business dealings attract federal attention, whose enemies occasionally try to kill him, whose idea of a quiet evening involves examining potentially stolen artifacts worth millions of dollars. I realize that, Alessandro said. And I realize that you're the kind of person who would rather face danger while doing meaningful work than live safely while accomplishing nothing important. I'm also aware that you've been handling dangerous situations with remarkable competence for months now. Sophia laughed despite the gravity of the moment. That's true. I did tackle an armed criminal and perform field surgery in a warehouse. Not exactly traditional waitress skills. She looked at the ring again, at the man offering it, at the laboratory around them filled with priceless artifacts they were working to authenticate and protect. Your timing is terrible, she said, sliding the ring onto her finger. We're in the middle of 3 major investigations. The Italian ministry meeting is tomorrow, and I still have to finish reviewing those Byzantine manuscripts before the weekend. Alessandro's smile was brilliant. So that's a yes. That's a yes to all of it. To the marriage, to the work, to building something permanent together. To truth conquering all, even when it's inconvenient. He stood, pulling her up with him, and when he kissed her, it tasted like promises and permanence and a future that was anything but invisible. The Italian ministry investigation led to discoveries that reverberated through the international art world for months. Sophia's team identified over 40 forged Renaissance drawings that had been successfully placed in museums and private collections across Europe and North America. The sophistication of the operation was staggering, involving corrupt auction house employees, bribed authentication experts, and a network of skilled forgers working with genuinely period materials. Alessandro's connections proved invaluable in navigating the complex jurisdictional and diplomatic issues that arose as the investigation expanded. His legitimate business relationships with museums, galleries, and private collectors provided cover for the extensive travel and inquiries necessary to track down fraudulent pieces and identify their sources. Martinez coordinated security for the team as they traveled between Rome, Paris, London, and New York, examining suspect pieces and gathering evidence. The work was intellectually fascinating but physically exhausting, and occasionally dangerous when they encountered sellers who were less than pleased to have their merchandise questioned. In London, Sophia identified a supposedly 15th-century illuminated Bible that had been created using parchment from genuinely medieval sources, but with modern inks and gold leaf. The seller, a respected gallery owner who claimed to have inherited the piece from his grandfather, became increasingly agitated as Sophia explained the technical evidence for modern creation. The gallery owner's associate, a large man with scarred hands and an unfriendly expression, suggested that perhaps Sophia's analysis was mistaken, that second opinions might be advisable. Alessandro, who had been quietly examining other pieces in the gallery, moved to stand beside Sophia. His presence was relaxed but unmistakably protective. "I trust Dr. Chin's expertise completely," he said in a tone that carried subtle menace. "Her analysis has been confirmed by independent laboratory testing. If you'd like to discuss this further, I'm sure we can arrange a meeting with representatives from Scotland Yard's Art Fraud Division." The gallery owner's demeanor changed quickly. He suggested that perhaps there had been a misunderstanding about the piece's provenance, that maybe it would be better withdrawn from sale pending further research. Sophia and Alessandro left the gallery with another fraud prevented and another piece of the larger conspiracy documented. In Paris, they traced a network of forged medieval manuscripts back to a workshop operating in a converted monastery outside the city. The forgers had been remarkably clever, using genuinely old vellum sourced from damaged period manuscripts, inks created using historical recipes, and binding techniques researched from museum conservation guides. But they had made the same mistake Sophia had noticed in other pieces, creating work that was too perfect, too consistent with idealized notions of medieval craftsmanship, rather than the subtle variations that characterized genuine period work. The French authorities raided the workshop and discovered an operation that had been producing high-end forgeries for nearly a decade. Among the evidence recovered were detailed records showing sales to collectors and museums in 12 countries, with total revenues exceeding $200 million. At the center of the operation was a name Sophia and Alessandro recognized from their earlier investigations. Vincent Romano had been coordinating the forgery network from federal custody, using coded communications and trusted intermediaries to continue his art fraud empire even while awaiting trial. The discovery led to additional charges and a broader investigation into corruption within the prison system that had allowed Vincent to maintain his criminal operations. Sophia found herself testifying before federal grand juries, international art crime task forces, and congressional committees investigating the scope of fraud in the legitimate art market. Her expertise had made her one of the most sought-after authentication specialists in the world, but it had also made her a target for remaining members of the forgery network who viewed her as a threat to their continued operations. The security measures around Sophia and Alessandro's work became increasingly elaborate. The Red Hook facility was equipped with military-grade surveillance systems, bulletproof glass, and multiple escape routes. Their travel required coordination with law enforcement agencies in multiple countries, and their public appearances were carefully planned to minimize risk. Despite the precautions, there were incidents. A car bomb in Rome, discovered and defused before detonation. A break-in at the Red Hook facility, interrupted by Martinez's security team. Anonymous threats delivered to Sophia's mother, who had been relocated to a secure medical facility as her treatment continued. Each incident reinforced the importance of their work and the determination of those who profited from art fraud to stop them. But it also strengthened Sophia's resolve to continue. She had seen too much of the damage caused by systematic deception in the art world, too many legitimate scholars and honest collectors defrauded by sophisticated lies. The work had become a mission that extended far beyond her original goal of providing medical care for her mother. Alessandro proposed that they formalize their authentication network as an international foundation, funded by major collectors and museums who had benefited from their fraud prevention work. The Elena Chin Foundation for Art Authentication would establish permanent offices in New York, London, Paris, and Rome, staffed by specialists in every major period and region of art history. Sophia would serve as chief authentication officer, with authority to investigate suspect pieces regardless of their value or the reputation of their sellers. The Foundation's first major case involved a collection of supposedly ancient Greek sculptures that had been offered to several major museums. The pieces were extraordinarily beautiful, carved from genuine ancient marble with techniques that appeared consistent with classical Greek artistry. The documentation claimed they had been discovered in a previously unexplored site in southern Italy, legally excavated and properly exported. Sophia's team spent weeks examining the sculptures, analyzing the marble composition, studying tool marks under microscopic magnification, and researching the claimed excavation site. The work was meticulous and technically demanding, requiring expertise in archaeology, geology, and classical art history. The breakthrough came when Dr. James Morrison, their classical antiquities specialist, noticed an inconsistency in one sculpture's base. The marble showed signs of having been cut with modern diamond wire saws, a technique that left microscopically different marks than ancient tools. Further investigation revealed that the sculptures had been carved from marble blocks taken from a genuine ancient quarry, but the carving had been done in the 20th century by skilled artisans working from photographs and descriptions of authentic pieces. The forgers had been remarkably sophisticated, using period-appropriate tools for the final finishing work to disguise the modern creation techniques. But they had been unable to completely hide the evidence of modern preparation work on the marble blocks themselves. The case prevented the sale of $50 million worth of fraudulent artifacts and exposed a network of dealers who had been systematically creating fake archaeological discoveries using genuine ancient materials. It also demonstrated the level of technical sophistication that Sophia's team had developed, earning them recognition as the world's leading authority on art authentication. 2 years after their engagement, Sophia and Alessandro were married in a private ceremony at the Red Hook facility, surrounded by the artifacts they had authenticated and the team they had built together. Sophia's mother, whose treatment had been successful thanks to the Foundation's medical coverage, served as maid of honor. Martinez walked Alessandro down the aisle, a gesture that honored his role as family counselor and protector. The ceremony was conducted in both English and Italian, with readings from medieval texts on the nature of truth and beauty. Alessandro's vows included a promise to support Sophia's work even when it meant challenging powerful people, to protect the foundation they had built together, and to continue believing that truth was worth defending regardless of the cost. Sophia's vows included a promise to bring the same scholarly rigor to their marriage that she brought to her work, to build a partnership based on intellectual honesty and mutual respect, and to face whatever dangers their work brought with the same courage she had shown when she first spoke up about a forged document. The reception featured wine that Alessandro had personally authenticated as genuinely vintage, food prepared by chefs Martinez had vetted for security clearance, and toast from colleagues who had flown in from around the world. Dr. Elena Vasquez presented them with a jointly authored paper on advanced techniques for identifying art forgeries, noting that their collaboration had revolutionized approaches to authentication in multiple fields. Professor Richard Blackwood, who had been quietly supporting their work since the embarrassment of the original forged documents, offered a toast to the importance of admitting mistakes and learning from experts who knew more than oneself. Even several FBI and Interpol agents who had worked with their team attended, acknowledging the law enforcement value of their fraud prevention efforts. The honeymoon was spent examining a private collection in Tuscany, where Sophia identified 3 previously unknown authentic Renaissance drawings and one spectacular fake that had been created by a 19th-century forger with remarkable skill. Alessandro joked that most couples visited tourist sites, while they visited private art collections under security escort. Sophia replied that most couples didn't have the opportunity to discover lost masterpieces on their wedding trip. 5 years after Sophia Chun first spoke up about a forged document, the Elena Chun Foundation for Art Authentication had prevented over $2 billion in art fraud, established authentication standards adopted by major museums worldwide, and trained a new generation of specialists in advanced forgery detection techniques. Sophia had become the most recognized name in art authentication, sought after by collectors, law enforcement agencies, and academic institutions around the world. Alessandro had successfully transitioned his business operations to completely legitimate art dealing, using the foundation's expertise to build a reputation for acquiring only pieces with unquestionable authenticity. His collection had grown to include pieces that were not necessarily the most expensive available, but were certainly among the most rigorously authenticated. Their marriage had evolved into a partnership that seamlessly blended personal affection with professional collaboration. They worked together daily, traveled together frequently for investigations, and had built a life that honored both truth and love. Sophia never returned to being invisible. Her expertise and integrity had made her a public figure in the art world, someone whose opinion could determine the value of pieces worth millions of dollars. She spoke at international conferences, testified in high-profile fraud cases, and consulted with museums and collectors who wanted to ensure the authenticity of their most precious pieces. But she had also learned to balance public responsibility with private happiness, professional achievement with personal relationships. The foundation employed nearly 100 specialists worldwide, operated permanent laboratories in 6 cities, and maintained relationships with law enforcement agencies in 30 countries. Their work had exposed art fraud networks on every continent, protected countless collectors from purchasing forgeries, and established new standards for due diligence in art transactions. Alessandro continued to use his connections and resources to support the foundation's work, providing funding for expensive investigations and facilitating cooperation with international partners. His transition from questionably legitimate businessman to respected art dealer had been gradual but complete, earning him recognition from institutions that had previously viewed him with suspicion. Together, they had built something that was simultaneously a successful business, an important public service, and a meaningful personal legacy. The work continued to be dangerous occasionally, but it was also rewarding in ways that Sophia had never imagined when she was serving wine to people who didn't see her. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Sophia and Alessandro stood once again on the balcony of his Tribeca building, looking out over Manhattan as evening lights began to appear across the city. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and the sky clear. "You know," Sophia said, leaning against the railing, "when I first spoke up about that forged document, I thought I was just preventing a financial loss. I had no idea it would lead to all this." "All this," Alessandro repeated, gesturing to encompass not just the city below but the life they had built together. International recognition, marriage to a reformed criminal, a career spent examining potentially stolen artifacts and occasionally dodging assassination attempts from angry forgers. "Any regrets?" "None whatsoever," Sophia said promptly. "Though I should mention that my mother has started asking when we're going to give her grandchildren. She seems to think that since we've mastered authenticating Renaissance art and dismantling international fraud networks, raising children should be relatively straightforward." Alessandro laughed. "Your mother has a point. After everything we've accomplished, how difficult could parenthood be?" Sophia gave him a look that suggested he was about to discover just how much he didn't know about parenting. But she was smiling as she said it, already imagining a future that included not just artifacts and investigations, but family dinners and school events, and teaching their children about the importance of truth in a world that often preferred comfortable lies. The city sparkled below them, 8 million people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, building their own versions of happiness and success. And on a balcony high above it all, a scholar and a businessman who had found love through truth continued planning a future that honored both integrity and joy. Because truth, as Sophia had learned, didn't just conquer all. It created everything worth keeping. And you just experienced a story about love that grew from honesty, courage that developed through necessity, and the kind of partnership that builds something larger than either person could accomplish alone. If you want more stories that celebrate intelligence, integrity, and the power of standing up for what's right, then subscribe. We're building a community of people who believe that truth is worth defending and love is worth fighting for. Join us. Click subscribe, explore our other videos, and let's keep telling stories that matter. See you in the comments. Tell me what you thought of Sophia and Alessandro's journey from that first dangerous moment to their life building something meaningful together.